Hello everyone and welcome to The Quarantine. I'm your host, Wolf, and maybe I'm born with it, maybe it's Maybelline. Today I'll be taking a look at Tales of Hearts R, developed by 7th Chord on Vita and Namco Tales Studios on 3DS, and published by Bandai Namco. I'm going to start out by saying I've only logged about 20 or so hours into the game, and I'm about halfway through, and I'll explain why. If and when I ever do complete the game, I will post a new review on it if my views do change, and I have gotten permission to use the gameplay footage from Anime Games Online, so I'd like to make a special thanks to them for allowing me to use their gameplay footage, because I know I have gotten some complaints about the crappy webcam footage and whatnot. So, again, thanks Anime Games Online for letting me use your footage. I really wanted to like Tales of Hearts R. I love JRPGs. Persona 3 and 4, I've logged somewhere around 90 hours into each one. Final Fantasy X, I logged about the same, probably close to 100 hours. Chrono Trigger I've beaten a couple times, Parasite Eve being one of my favorite games of all time. The only other Tales games I've played was Tales of Destiny on the original PlayStation. But Tales of Hearts R just couldn't hold my attention at all. Every time I would sit down and I would play it, about 30 minutes later I'd want to do something else. I'd want to play a little bit more Freedom Wars, or maybe play some Project Diva F2nd, or play some random computer game, some Total War, I never really wanted to play it for extended periods of time like I usually do with a JRPG. Normally, I'll sit down, I'll start playing a JRPG, and suddenly, next thing I know, 6 hours later, I'm still playing the damn thing. I didn't get that with Tales of Hearts R, and I really don't know a specific reason why. The gameplay of Tales is actually fairly decent. The combat is 2D in a 3D world, kind of. You combine normal attacks and Spira arts, basically special abilities, to take down foes and rack up combos. Your Spira arts use TP and have a maximum use at one time based on the number in the bottom left next to your life below the portrait. And this recharges slowly so you can't spam your strong attacks. The meter you have on the left side of the screen slowly fills up, and when you do use it, it grants you buffs, unlimited use of Spira arts, provided of course you have enough TP, and later on in the game allows you to unleash these super attacks, I guess you could call them. Now, items can be used to heal and revive. They're also on a timer, so you can't spam them, and I actually really like that. Though it does get annoying when someone does go down in the middle of a boss fight, you use an item to bring them back. It takes a second or so for that to actually proc, depending on what the character you selected to use the item is currently doing. And then a split second before the item goes off, you finish the boss fight, so that person that it was down gets absolutely nothing. Happened several times, and it was really annoying. And then the game also has random encounters, which piss me off to no end. Even an Atrian Odyssey style, you're about to get attacked system, in my opinion, is preferred to a completely random battle system. Drives me nuts. But if the game is enjoyable, the story's engaging, whatnot, I can deal with it. Overall, though, the battle system just feels weightless and unfulfilling. It lacks something. I don't really know what. It always left me just wanting more, I was hoping for combat a bit more like Star Ocean. I would have even preferred the traditional turn-based, this is the turn order, standard turn-based combat, allowing a bit more strategy. For me anyways, it felt like all I did was spam X when all of my arts points were back to maximum. I spam circle and up, or whatever my strongest attack was in my arsenal, rinse and repeat. I don't know, maybe after the 20-hour mark later in the game it gets a little more fulfilling, but I don't know, I wasn't feeling it. My favorite thing, though, about the combat is while fighting enemies, there's an arrow above whoever you're targeting, and it shows up with an estimate of how much health they have left, which is pretty cool. And the first time you fight one, the arrow is yellow. And it doesn't change, so because you've never actually killed one, so you don't know how much health they have left. I just thought that was a small little thing that was pretty cool. After combat, each of the characters sometimes have a little conversation, which is pretty cool and funny sometimes, but it does get old and really annoying, especially when you're trying to get from point A to point B in some dungeon or in the overworld map, and you keep getting screwed by the random encounters every 5 fucking steps. You can skip the conversation with the circle button, but I mean, it still does get annoying and old. I do, however, love the customization of the game. Modifying your Soma with points that you gain every time you level up, and it changes your stats according to what Soma you've leveled up. Sometimes even mutating when two Somas are at the right level and they're next to each other. The game says it happens when they build up at the same rate, but it's full of shit. I had multiple mutations between, like level 8 and a level 4 Soma shards. So, I mean, but it's a neat little addition and gives you some flexibility in how you build each individual character. So it's pretty cool. This is also the way you get new weapons, abilities, and skills, by evolving certain Soma shards. Your Soma is basically an item you carry with you that spits crap out sometimes, and it's where you pull your weapon from. The game doesn't seem to force any grinding, which is pretty strange for a JRPG. I got about halfway through it without any grinding at all, albeit the random encounters bombarded me enough with combat to not really have to. The dungeons are pretty bland and boring as well, in my opinion. Think a Persona-style dungeon without random generation, with random encounters, and the occasional somewhat easy puzzle. Mostly floors have nothing, laid out in a maze where every 5 to 10 steps you're randomly going to have to fight things. The theme, however, of some of them are pretty neat, like the Spiro ones. You have to basically enter people's Spira to gather Kohaku. I know I'm going to probably get yelled at by how I pronounce that. But you have to gather Kohaku shards. The idea is cool, but again, they're mostly empty and bland, with a little boss at the end and random encounters peppered throughout it. That said, the puzzles in each dungeon are pretty cool sometimes. Other times, you basically just have to find the exit. Overall, I only entered 1 or 2 dungeons, I'm wanting to say 2, that I found fun. And that was the first, and I think it was the 3rd dungeon. I think were pretty cool. Later on, you get a ring that adds a little bit of variety, and a little bit of I guess puzzle, you could call it, to some of the dungeons, but overall, again, they're big and empty. They feel boring, in my opinion. There are side quests in the game, but nothing a whole lot more elaborate than talk to this guy, maybe answer a couple questions, maybe enter his Soma to cure him of despair, and then you get items. So there's no like, hey, there's a rumor here that this dungeon's got this in it, and then you go adventure to that dungeon. It's all generally, you just talk to the guy, maybe go a couple steps away, and that was it. I don't know, wasn't real excited by the side quests. I did maybe 3 of them, and then I just kind of stopped doing them because they were pretty boring. Also, I do want to mention the game has some kind of microtransactions. I honestly have no idea what they're for, how they're used, anything like that. I didn't buy any, and never came across any time where it felt like I needed them. But they're on the PlayStation Store, and I don't really know what they're for. Just something I thought I'd point out. The controls are pretty standard. In combat, you can use the joystick to move around, but you can only activate your different abilities that you have using the D-pad. You can also map some to the right joystick, where you can flick it in a certain direction. It'll always do, this attack and whatnot. But it still gives the feeling that the combat was supposed to be 2D, as it was in the original. Honestly, I would have preferred it like that. I remember loving Tales of Destiny. I don't remember a whole lot about it, but I do remember really enjoying the way the combat was. The game is fully voiced and in Japanese with English subtitles, which sometimes is pretty hit or miss, but it works well enough for the most part, and it's not nearly as bad as Sword Art Online was. The music is probably its strongest point. It's very enjoyable. I don't really have a whole lot to say about it, especially negatively. It's great. If it came with a soundtrack, it would definitely be something I'd listen to in the car or maybe at work or something. It's really well done. The story is probably what killed the most about the game to me. The story is mediocre at best, so far anyways. I have been playing it in hopes that it gets more engaging, but I don't know, there's no sense of urgency, there's no, the world is going to end unless this happens, like Persona, your friends were going to die in the fourth one anyways. Parasite Eve, you got to chase down Eve before she murders a million people. I mean, stuff like that. There's no sense of urgency to the story so far. Though I do have to say, some of the story elements are pretty cool. The main character, Squeeze, Kohaku, loses her Spira, and it gets shattered into a bunch of pieces and gets scattered all around the world. Each fragment represents a different emotion: fear, joy, love, so on and so forth. Without them, she's basically just an emotionless husk. As you get them back, she gains those emotions again. And if somebody has the Spirit Shard, say, in them, they get an abundance of that feeling. Like fear, for example, makes one of the guys too afraid to do anything, even though the woman he loves is in danger. Once you remove Kohaku's shard, they go back to normal, you give it to her, and she gains that emotion back, sometimes leading to some pretty funny interactions. The cast, in my opinion, is pretty boring. Cole, or Core, I guess that's his original name in the original Japanese, I don't know, the main character, is about as boring as they come. He meets Kohaku, passed out on the beach in the first 5 minutes of the game, and suddenly falls head over heels in love with her, and that's pretty much his entire motivation of the game. It feels really forced. On top of that, Hisui, I think is how you pronounce it, is probably one of the most obnoxious, annoying twats I've seen in a game in a long fucking time. He just feels edgy and angry for the sake of being edgy and angry. I don't know what else to say about him. He literally ruins a big portion of the game for me, as every time he opens his mouth, I wind up rolling my eyes and feel like I want to skip most of his dialogue. And I know he's just going to say something annoying and belittling and tell you to stay away from his sister. And I'm pretty sure he's a ciscon. And I guess Wincest is best cis, I don't know. Most of the jokes feel really forced, and most of the time aren't very funny. The boob jokes, for example, with Ines are pretty stupid. They start talking about how large they are, and how does she carry those around like that, and oh man, I would love to touch them, and blah blah blah, and then it winds up they're actually talking about bags of money that she's holding. They feel like something a 12-year-old in middle school is going to laugh at. And, I mean, this is coming from somebody who loves the Senran Kagura series, for example, if that gives you any idea of how, stupid and forced the jokes feel. One of the best parts, though, is the optional interactions between the characters. They pop up based on progression, it seems. You get this little pop-up in the lower left-hand corner, you hit back, and then the characters' portraits pop up, and they interact with each other, and usually starts forming bonds and stuff. It adds a smidget of depth to the otherwise hollow characters. And then Hisui opens his fucking mouth and ruins it all. For the most part, these do feel a little forced sometimes as well, but they can add a little bit of depth and background to each character. So, I mean, they're alright. They're pretty cool. There's this stuff called despair in the world, where these monsters called Zerom are eating Spira, and you being a somatic are like one of the only ones that can cure them by entering them and killing the Zerom. It's kind of a neat concept, but it just feels kind of tacked on a lot of the time. The game does sometimes cut to these 5 to 10 seconds of beautifully animated anime-style cutscenes. I wish there were more. If they were to turn it into an anime, I would love to watch it. Overall, though, I mean, the story just felt bland and detached. Never once did I feel a sense of urgency, and the lack of a backlog for chat if you accidentally miss something, that's pretty annoying as well. I mean, for a JRPG, the fact that the story is bland, boring, and lacks depth is kind of a killer, in my opinion. It just really turned me off of the story. In closing, should you buy Tales of Hearts R? Honestly, I have a hard time recommending it at all. If you have nothing else to play and you're looking for a mediocre at best JRPG, then I don't know, I suppose. But I would say try out one of the aforementioned RPGs if you haven't played them already. Ys Memory of Celceta, much better game. Granted, it's an action RPG, but still. I mean, hell, Conception I enjoyed more than this. Um, Sorcery Saga. I mean, there's a plethora of games that I enjoyed a hell of a lot more than Tales of Hearts are. And I know I'm in the minority in this. The game has 90s from the users on Metacritic, and I think a 76 from the critics. I don't know, I just couldn't get into it at all. Every time I would sit down and play it, after about 30 minutes to an hour, if I would make it that long, I would always find myself wanting to do something else. While playing games that I mentioned earlier, I'd always look forward to playing them, look forward to getting off from work to go home and play them. This, I would force myself to play it because I was hoping it would get better. When I play any game, especially an RPG, I'm generally motivated by the story, even a mediocre story, as long as it's engaging and interesting. I mean, hell, Senran Kagura has a really stupid story, but it's fun. It's an enjoyable, funny story. And it knows what it's doing, and it knows what it is. Persona 3 has a sense of urgency. Parasite Eve is engaging and has great pacing. Hell, Akiba Trip is absurd and silly and over the top. Just this felt empty. I mean, I don't know why I didn't enjoy Tales of Hearts. I just didn't. I might go back to it when I'm bored. I'll probably actually still keep playing it. I just I don't know, when I don't feel like playing something. I don't know. I feel like I'm missing something, or maybe I'm in the wrong mindset to play it, as every review and forum is raging about how amazing the game is. If and when I ever beat the game, I may make a second video if my opinion on it changes. And I'm also calling it now. I'm going to, after this review, I'll probably keep playing it, try in hopes that it gets better, and the story will pick up, and I'm going to love it. I'm calling it now. I would also, again, like to thank Anime Games Online for letting me use their gameplay footage. I don't have the funds to afford the Vita capture device, and the webcamming does look pretty terrible. So I'm just going to do it this way if possible, and of course I will get permission from whoever's videos I do wind up using. If you would like to help me out in this area, I have a link in my About page, and that would be cool. If you could like, comment, and subscribe, and I will see you next time in the quarantine. And now if you'll excuse me, I'm going to go brace myself for the hate and slander I'm going to get for not liking the game.